Jai Hind, Namaste, hello and a very warm welcome to UPSC for everyone. My name is Abhinav and in this video we'll be discussing selected topics from the Hindu and Indian Express for the date 14th of October 2020. Now in this video we'll be discussing the following topics. After talks failed to break the impasse, China blames India for tensions. So China is a crybaby and it is again blaming India. India's economy to contract by 10.3% this fiscal, says the IMF report. So we'll see what this IMF report is saying. Then Pakistan likely to remain on FATF grey list. So I will tell you what is FATF, what is the grey list and why Pakistan is likely to remain. Then even network to handle COVID-19 vaccine supply. So I will tell you the even network and we'll also look at the government preparation to distribute vaccine when it gets available. Then single SBI branch for all FCR accounts, government. So from 1st April 2021, all the NGOs wanting FCRA contributions have to open account at SBI branch in New Delhi. So we'll see what is that about. Then for talks, Turkish ship must pull back, says Greece. Turkey is back at it. Now it is again sending its research ship Okusre in the Eastern Mediterranean and again picking up fight with Greece. So we'll see what are the latest developments. Then psych module in Army Battle School to train soldiers in the valley. So this is about the professional conduct of the Indian Army and we'll get to know what kind of a training our soldiers and officers go through before they are posted in the valley. Then Supreme Court notice to center on petition to regulate minors' access to social media. So this is a petition in Supreme Court and it says that minors have unregulated access to social media in India. So there needs to be some kind of regulation. So we'll see that. Then Johnson & Johnson pauses coronavirus vaccine trials due to unexplained illness. So after AstraZeneca, this is the second highest profile vaccine trial that has halted. So we'll see what this is about and what is the Warp Speed program. Then Lebanon and Israel, long time forced to start talks on disputed waters. So I will be showing you the map and I will also tell you why they are now talking about these waters, because officially both are still at war. For the past 30 years, they haven't had talks on any civilian issue. So let's see what this is about. Then the editorials, 3 editorials from the Hindu. A slim stimulus. So this is more about what we discussed yesterday about the stimulus package. So this is more like a revision for you. Crisis in Caucasus, again this is like a revision for you because we have discussed the crisis in Caucasus. And a concerted attack on RTI, again this is a revision because we covered this yesterday as well, right? And for your convenience, I have also added the timestamps in the description. So if you want to skip to particular news, you just press this timestamp and you'll reach there. And the PDF copy of this video is available on our Telegram channel. I will be providing the link in the description box. So please join us there so that you can get free PDF of the video that we are discussing. And also please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon and give us a thumbs up if you like our video. So without further delays, let us get started. For talks, Turkish ship must pull back, says Greece. So again, under Mr. Erdogan, Turkey is flexing its muscle. It is trying to be the de facto leader of the Islamic world. And that is why it is engaging in strongman geopolitics. So Mr. Erdogan is picking up fights everywhere he can. He is just turning into a new China. But interestingly, he forgets about the Islamic Ummah when it comes to the Chinese atrocities in the Xinjiang region. Now what is happening? See, this is Turkey and these are the Greek islands, right? So this under UNCLOS, these are all coming under the jurisdiction of Greece. But Turkey says that they also have rights over this region and they are sending their ships for exploration of oil. And once they find oil, they want to exploit those oil resources. Now, why is Turkey barking so much? Because Turkey has access to sophisticated weapons it got from the NATO. Even Greece is a NATO member and Turkey is increasingly becoming an embarrassment for NATO. I'm just not able to understand why NATO is not kicking Turkey out. Because Turkey had the unique chance to be the connection between the Islamic world and NATO and build bridges, but it is acting in totally different way. Now in the present scenario, this is the island that is in focus, Castello Rizzo, right? So Greece will not hold talks with Turkey on diffusing tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean unless Ankara withdraws the energy research ship from the contested area. Again, the ship is Okusre. They will send it again. If you remember, we discussed in August, there was a standoff between Turkey and Greece because of Turkey sending its ship. Now it is again picking up a fight. The Turkish Navy said that the Okusre ship will restart activities in the region, including the south of Castello Rizzo. Greece claims rights over the waters around its islands of Castello Rizzo, but Turkey says that the island's close proximity to its longer coastline makes the territory a legitimate area for its vessels to explore. And all these territories are marked under UNCLOS, the UN mandated law, but Turkey, it seems that they are considering themselves above the law like China. So a dispute over gas exploration saw the two NATO countries stage rival military drills in August in strategic waters between Cyprus and Greek island of Crete. Now this problem will again become something big because Mr. Erdogan, he will pick a fight anywhere he can. Crisis in Caucasus. Again, this editorial is from the Hindu, and this is, I think, 20th article about Caucasus in the Hindu. So there's nothing new in this article, so we'll just quickly go through it. So Russia brokered ceasefire, but it crumbled immediately, right? Now Azerbaijan is backed by Turkey, and Turkey is interfering in the region because I've told you time and again that Turkey under Erdogan wants to make itself the de facto leader of the Islamic world, right? So Turkey is intervening everywhere, and this conflict gives Turkey a chance to intervene in the South Caucasus as well, right? So Azerbaijan seems determined on the offensive. Now the brief history that in 1988, when the Soviet power was receding, there was a regional assembly in Nagorno-Karabakh, and that voted to join Armenia, but that triggered ethnic clashes. Why? Because Armenia has both Christians and Turkic Muslims. So that led to ethnic clashes. Now, after the disintegration of Soviet Union in 1991, Armenia and Azerbaijan, they went to war. By the time a ceasefire was reached in 1994, the rebels with support from Armenia and Russia, they established a de facto rule and extended their influence to the Armenian border. I'll just show you the map as well. Ever since, the border has remained tense. Again, see, this is Azerbaijan, this is Armenia. This region comes under the Azerbaijani territory. So this is Nagorno-Karabakh, right? And this region is controlled by the Armenian army, and this is known as Lachin Corridor, right? So this is the map, and these are the Caucasus Mountains, right? So that is why this region is known as South Caucasus. This is Armenia. Here is your Azerbaijan, Armenia, and here is Turkey. Now external intervention making the clashes far more dangerous. Turkey's game. Turkey is trying to expand its geopolitical reach to the former Ottoman regions, and the conflict is an opportunity to enter South Caucasus. The pre-Soviet Azerbaijan was a local ally of Ottomans. So that is the reason why, and I've told you that the Muslims living there are Turkic Muslims, so they have ethnic and linguistic bonds with Turkey. Now talking of double standards, Turkey has called Armenia a threat to peace in the region, and the Azeris and Turks share ethnic and linguistic bonds, and Turkey has a particularly bad relationship with Armenia. Now the Russian dilemma. See, first of all, Russia enjoys good economic and defense ties with both Armenia and Azerbaijan. Armenia is a CSTO member, and it is also host to Russian military base. And I've also told you that in CSTO, out of the 6 members, 3 are facing troubles. Kyrgyzstan, where there is a problem. Then Belarus, problem called Lukashenko. And then there is Armenia. So Russia does not want that this clash should turn into something big, because it will open another front for Russia, and it will directly peg Russia against Turkey. They are already playing a game in Syria, and Russia is involved in conflicts in Syria, Ukraine, and Libya. So it does not want another problem, right? So both CSTO and its multiple conflicts have forced Russia to take a very calculated stand. As a matter of fact, Russia follows a multi-vector diplomacy, right? So it never takes a clear stand. For example, when it comes to the clashes between India and China, now Russia is close to both India and China, so it has not taken a clear stand. All it says is that this issue should be resolved amongst these two countries, right? Now Armenia, under Article 4 of the CSTO treaty, can ask for Russian help, and I have also discussed the CSTO treaty. It comprises of 6 members, and it is led by Russia. You can go back to the earlier videos and you can check that out. Now if Moscow responds favorably, then it would be Russia against Turkey. Russia does not want that. So this is all about this editorial. Pakistan, the terror factory of the world, likely to remain on FATF grey list. What is FATF? FATF is an international organization which checks for terror financing. So it is a global watchdog. It has 39 members, including 37 countries and 2 international organizations. So what happens that if a country is engaging in terror financing or is a safe hub for terror financing, then it is put in grey list and blacklist. So what happens that these countries cannot access international finance, and their international trade also gets restricted. So Pakistan has been for a very long time in the grey list, and then it was given a list of 27 points, out of which it has complied to 21, but it has left 6 key areas like putting restrictions on Mullah Masood Azhar. And what other terrorist dogs that they have in their country. Now, who saves Pakistan every time from getting into blacklist? China. Now the culprit is China, and one day they will face the same problem in their country, you mark my words. So the latest evaluation saw Pakistan clear 21 of 27 action plans, and even these actions that Pakistan has taken are all a farce. Now what is FATF? It is an international money laundering and terror financing watchdog. It is an intergovernmental body and it sets international standards that aim to prevent illegal activities and the harm they cause to society. And they have jurisdiction in more than 200 countries. Now, what is a grey list? It is a warning that if you don't mend your ways, you might come into blacklist. So those countries that are considered safe haven for supporting terror funding and money laundering are included in this list. If a country is unable to curb mushrooming of terror funding and money laundering, then it is shifted to blacklist. Now, what happens when a country is in grey list? It faces economic sanctions from international institutions, and you know that Pakistan is beggar of the world. It begs from every country and every organization. It would be a very big problem for Pakistan if it is put under economic sanctions. A country in grey list also faces problems in getting loans from international institutions like IMF, World Bank and ADB, and there would be overall reduction in international trade. Now, this is one area where Pakistan is safe because Pakistan's only worth mentioning export to the world is terror. That is the only thing that this country produces. So they won't face any problem here. But on these two counts, the beggary and the pity money that they get from other countries, they won't be able to get that once they are put into blacklist, right? The plenary that will happen next week, Pakistan needs at least 3 of the 39 members to keep it off the blacklist. So China is always there, its friend, and China will help manage 2 others. And a support of 12 out of 39 members to exit the grey list. Now, this is not going to happen because India is actively working to put at least in the grey list and ensure that it does not escape the grey list. So let's see what happens at the plenary. A slim stimulus. So this editorial is from the Hindu, and this is basically a revision of what all we covered about this sort of mini stimulus that the finance minister announced, right? It first says that according to finance minister, this would lend 73,000 crore demands per only if the government sector follows this, and if the private sector follows suit, then it would rise to 1 lakh crore. This package would cost the exchequer about 0.2% of the GDP. We have discussed everything yesterday, so it is just a revision. And the overall fiscal support through the pandemic is now up to 1.7% of the GDP. The center also increased its own capital expenditure by another 25,000 crore. Now they say it is good. We discussed that those 25,000 crore would be invested in capital intensive projects, and I told you the importance that it generates jobs and it has a multiplier effect. It spurs demand, especially in the core sector. Now the pandemic restrictions, it says, could hamper the ability to get the new projects going. Now again it says that there are too many conditions. For example, in LTC perks, I told you that the voucher that they'll get for the LTC perks, they have to buy a consumable good or service which attracts at least 12% of GST, and that too from a GST registered vendor. So this is sort of a limitation and restriction upon the people. Their avenues of spending are limited. Then states are also facing some sort of limitation, though they have been allowed 12,000 crore and they can use this money to pay off existing contractors' dues. But this would not have the impact because 2,000 crore have been earmarked for the states who complete 3 of the 4 reforms that were mandated in the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, and only a few states would be able to qualify for this. So in their opinion, this package won't be sufficient for states as well. So this is all about this editorial. See, the point is that there are limited news and these people, they keep churning and churning the same thing again and again, like I told you yesterday. After talks failed to break impasse, China blames India for tensions. So there was the 7th round of core commander talks in the Chushul sector, and no concrete solution could come out regarding de-escalation. So China is doing what it does the best, indulging in fake propaganda and blaming the others despite itself being the aggressor. So China said the root cause of the recent tensions was India's infrastructure development and military deployments along the LAC. Again, Chinese double standards. They have been building air bases and providing optical fiber internet connectivity to their troops, and they are blaming us, crazy people. Now, this statement was made by the foreign ministry. It came after the marathon talks, 7 core commanders held at Chushul, and they failed to reach an agreement on disengagement. Again, China says that it does not recognize Ladakh. Why? Because once we notified the UT of Ladakh, because Ladakh comprises of Aksai Chin, and I've told you time and again, Chinese Highway 219 connecting Xinjiang and Tibet, it runs through Aksai Chin, right? That is why China does not accept the legality of Aksai Chin, because once we made Ladakh a UT and we released new maps of India, it clearly includes the Aksai Chin region. So that is what the Chinese are saying. Now Chinese doublespeak because they have already upgraded their border infrastructure in Tibet and Xinjiang, and they enjoy an asymmetry in their favor. And they are also in the process of extending railway network in Tibet up to the border. And they are blaming us. Now India is also catching up. They have been particularly perturbed by the defense minister inaugurating 44 permanent bridges across 7 states and union territories built by the BRO, that is in the border regions. And this has rattled the Chinese again. So China is back to what it does the best, fake propaganda and blaming the other. India's economy to contract by 10.3% this fiscal, says IMF. So we already discussed the World Bank report, which said 9.2% contraction. And it also said that more and more people would be falling into extreme poverty. Similar things are being said by the IMF report. So the IMF report, World Economic Outlook for October 2020, title is Long and Difficult Ascent. It said that India's economy would contract, and then the expected bounce back is around 8.8% because probably of low base effect. Consumer prices are also expected to grow, which would be a good sign. The current account balance is also growing because of a number of reasons. The main reason being the limitation in the import of oils because of reduced demand. But then this will change in the coming months. Global economy, what it says, that it is poised to shrink by 4.4% in 2020. Recovery in 2021 is projected to be around 5.2%. Then it would ease off to around 3.5% in 2021 for the medium term, that is around 3 to 5 or 7 years. China, which is the culprit, its economy is expected to do better than the 2019 levels, and rest of the advanced, developing and emerging market economies were expected to see lower output even next year. And it says that the world would not catch up fully with its pre-pandemic 2020 to 25 projected growth. So the medium term growth trajectory that was projected, world would not be able to catch up. Now there would also be growth in poverty because there has been reverse in the progress since 1990s. The similar things have been said by the World Bank report as well. So this will increase inequality and it would cause severe setback to projected improvements in living standards across all groups of countries. And close to 90 million people could fall below the $1.90 a day extreme poverty threshold. If you remember, World Bank also said something similar and its figure was around 150 million. So this is about the IMF report. Now some articles from the Indian Express. So Supreme Court sends notice to Centre on petition to regulate minors' access to social media. Now this petition was filed by 2 law students and they say that in India there are no laws to monitor and to regulate the presence of minors on social media. They cite the example of US. US has laws that if a child is below the age of 13 years, then parents or guardians' consent is taken into consideration. But that is not the case in India. What really happens is that the app asks whether you are above 18 or 13 and then you get access. Now Supreme Court says that there is increased search for child porn and there is a concept called revenge porn. Online sale of private graphic information and such content on social media has created a harassing, exploitative and pedophilic environment on these platforms, and children are very, very susceptible and vulnerable to such attacks. So it is very, very important that their access to social media should be highly regulated. Johnson & Johnson pauses coronavirus vaccine trials due to unexplained illness. So this is the second high-profile COVID vaccine trial to be paused due to participant falling ill. Now, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccines are both based on so-called adenovirus. I've told you about what is adenovirus. It is an existing virus platform, and based on that platform, they are developing vaccines, right? Now, they are both the part of US government's Operation Warp Speed program to support vaccine development. So the program is called Warp Speed program. So the volunteer in the Johnson & Johnson, he showed some adverse reactions. So they have paused the trials. AstraZeneca also faced the similar problem last month when a volunteer in UK faced adverse reactions. Then the trials were halted, but they have been resumed in Britain, Brazil, South Africa and India. But in US, they are still halted, right? So this is all about this news. Single SBI branch for all FCRA accounts as per new government orders. under the amended FCRA 2020. So now government has mandated that there is a branch in New Delhi of SBI. All the NGOs that seek FCRA fundings from 1st April 2021 can only access funding if they have account in that particular branch of SBI, and they don't need to physically be present at the branch. They can approach any branch of SBI and they can open their accounts, but that account would be in the New Delhi branch at Sansad Marg. So Union Home Ministry has asked all NGOs seeking foreign donations to open designated FCRA account at the New Delhi branch, Sansad Marg. They shall not receive any donations in any other bank account from 1st April 2021. The order has been issued under the FCRA Act 2020, the amended act, and it enabled it to put this provision under this act. Now to open the account, the applicant need not visit the branch. They might approach the nearest SBI branch or the SBI branch of their choice and they can open the account, but that account would be officially at the New Delhi branch. And about 24 or 25,000 NGOs are getting FCRA funding, so all of them have to open their account there. A concerted attack on RTI. Again, we discussed about RTI and the study on the RTI yesterday, right? In yesterday's video. So today again we are going to discuss about it and we'll quickly go through it because there is nothing new in it. First we'll see the background of the RTI Act, then we'll see the impact it has had, then we'll see how it has been attacked by governments in terms of no fixed tenure of the members of the information commissions and there being several vacancies which are hampering the functions of these commissions, right? So let us get to it. So 15 years of enactment of RTI law. Now it was a result of a vibrant grassroots movement which comprised of both educated elite and the working class poor throughout the country, and the act was passed in 2005 and Supreme Court held that RTI comprises a fundamental right under Article 19 which is given to every citizen, the right to free speech and expression. Now what are the impacts and advantages? This has been used by people to seek information, to actively participate in decision making, hold governments accountable. Every year, nearly 6 million applications are filed under RTI, making it the most extensively used transparency legislation in the world. So this is very substantive. National assessments have shown that it is the poorest and the most marginalized who have understood the tremendous potential of this law to empower them to access their basic rights, and that is why they are the ones filing maximum RTIs. Now this is somewhat controversial because the poorest and the most marginalized do not know anything about this act, but it is the RTI activists who file RTI appeals on their behalf. Now many times those RTIs are heavily motivated and they are funded by some vested interests, so I'm not going to get into much of it. And this editorial has basically been written by 2 RTI activists. That is why I'm not getting into this point. They have made this point. I do not totally agree with this. They also say that it has been effectively used by public-spirited citizens to check corruption and arbitrary abuse of power. And they have even questioned the highest offices like the office of the PM. Now, this act has potentially created 1.3 billion whistleblowers and auditors. That is the entire population of India because everyone can access this. It has empowered citizens to question those who govern and hold them to account. Now attacks by governments. So first of all, no fixed tenure. Earlier there was a fixed tenure, but then RTI Act was amended in 2019, which allows the central government to determine the tenure and salaries of all information commissioners. Now this has seriously compromised with the independence and integrity of the commission. Several vacancies. We discussed yesterday as well that there are several vacancies under the act. There should be 11 information commissioners including the chief, but many states have vacancies including the CIC, which does not even have a chief right now since August. And then there are states like Tripura and Jharkhand where the information commissions are totally defunct. Now what happens because of these vacancies? Their functions are severely impeded. The large backlogs of appeals and complaints lead to long delays in the disposal of cases. Now they say that since May 2014, not even a single commissioner to CIC has been appointed without citizens having to go to courts. Supreme Court gave orders that all vacancies should be filled, but again 6 out of 11 posts of CIC are vacant, including the chief. The CIC is headless for the 5th time in the last 6 years, and state governments have also adopted the similar strategy. 8 information commissions are functioning without a chief, and 2, Tripura and Jharkhand, are totally defunct with no commissioners. So this editorial again is basically a revision of the editorial that we discussed yesterday. EV network to handle COVID-19 vaccine supply. So we already discussed the action plan that the government has put into place once the vaccine becomes available, how to ensure its distribution, right? So this is also an update on that. So there's a network called EV network which can track the latest vaccine stock position, temperature at storage facility, geotag health centers, and maintain facility level dashboard. It is being repurposed for the delivery of COVID-19 vaccines. And vaccine delivery management on track. So here you just need to know about the EVIN network, right? And these are the important points, because if you remember, I told you that they would ensure that those who are intended to get the vaccine get it, and they would be tracking it on also ensuring its delivery. So these are all the steps. Now, I also told you that on the priority basis, they would be identifying the people who would be getting the vaccine shots first. So that work is also being completed, and it will be completed by early November or October end. And cold chain augmentation is also being done as per the detailed implementation plan. And they are also recalibrating the digital platform and logistics of non-vaccine supplies. That means the connected issues, the delivery vehicles and other logistics that would be included in this process, including the manpower for identifying the vaccines, right? So this all comes under the non-vaccine supply. Psych module in Army Battle School to train soldiers in Valley. So basically the soldiers and officers up to the rank of colonel who go to the Valley and serve at the LOC, they get psych module training, which is to sensitize them about the relations with civilian population. So the Army Battle School that trains all soldiers and officers moving to Kashmir Valley has introduced a psychological module to its basic training program to make them more sensitive towards civilians. This school is called the Core Battalion School in Khreu village of J&K Pulwama district, and all the soldiers and officers up to the rank of colonel join this before they join their unit. The training is mandatory even for soldiers returning to Valley after a gap of 6 months. Now this module was designed by Defense Institute of Psychological Research. Now out of the soldiers that are going, a lot of 200 to 250 soldiers and officers from the total trainees go through this psychological capsule. Now why this? Because through this capsule, the army is trying to increase the cognitive memory regarding the rules of engagement so that soldiers are prepared for all eventualities and there are no allegations of human rights abuse or other problems in the Valley when soldiers deal with civilians. Now the job of soldiers is very, very tough in the Valley because there are many hostile parties. Whenever they go to conduct operations, they face stone pelting and whatnot, right? But unfortunately, our government asks them not to retaliate to such problems till it becomes a very grave problem, because you have to cater to the citizens as well. But this is at times very unfair to the soldiers. Now, what are the core tenets taught to all soldiers posted in Kashmir? Just conduct, necessity of operations, good faith, minimum use of force, no collateral damage, and impartiality. The soldiers are told that even at the cost of terrorists escaping, they should not have civilian casualties, and collateral damage to property should be avoided as well. A single incident where the rules of engagement are not followed by soldier can overshadow all other operations, and this is what happens, especially given the kind of media that we have in a country. When a soldier is martyred, they write a soldier is killed, and when a terrorist is killed, they say a terrorist martyred. So most of the media channels, I don't even want to get into the names, including the papers that we discuss, they are like that only. So really can't help it. So why I'm discussing this article is to tell you that Indian Army is a very, very disciplined force. It is one of the most professional armed forces in the world, and there is a propaganda against it. But you need to know that our army goes through tough training and they have psychological modules as well. But in the line of duty, at times when their own lives are in danger, they have to act in a manner which some people not agree with. But you really can't be judging on them sitting in the comfort of your own houses. Lebanon and Israel long time forced to start talk on disputed waters. First of all, let me show you the map. So this is Lebanon and this is Israel. So this is the disputed water region. Now why Lebanon wants to talk to Israel? Because Lebanon is facing economic hardships, and it hopes that if this disputed area is solved, they can access the natural resources, including potential oil and gas in the region that could help Lebanon financially, because we saw the latest tragedy, what happened in Lebanon, right? So they are in talks, and these talks again are being backed by US, and more pressure is mounting on Lebanon to have talks with Israel because many Arab countries are normalizing their relations with Israel. So it is high time that talks should be given a chance. Now let's get back to the article. So formally still at war after decades of conflict, they would launch talks to address the long-running dispute over their maritime border running through potentially gas-rich Mediterranean waters. So Mediterranean is in news these days because in Eastern Mediterranean, Turkey, Cyprus and Greece are involved in a conflict. Then this part of Mediterranean where Lebanon and Israel are talking about resolving their dispute. So you need to be thorough about your mapping with Mediterranean. The US mediated talks follow 3 years of intense diplomacy by Washington and were announced less than a month after United States stepped up the pressure on political allies of Iran-backed Lebanese group Hezbollah. Now Hezbollah also had a fight with Israel for 5 months, and Hezbollah does not agree with these talks. They also come after the UAE and Bahrain agreed to establish full relations with Israel under US broker deals, the Abraham Accords, right? Now Hezbollah, which fought 5-week conflict with Israel in 2006, says the talks are not a sign of peacemaking with its long-time enemy. Now why the talks? The talks regarding the maritime border will be the first time in 30 years that Lebanon and Israel have held talks on a civilian matter. One of the main reasons for the talk to be taking place now is thought to be because Lebanon is facing a big economic crisis, and if the border dispute is settled, the nation can start looking for undersea gas in the area to help give a boost to the economy. I told you in the map as well, right? So folks, this is all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please subscribe to our channel and please press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new notifications. And please give us a thumbs up if you like our videos. Also, do connect with us on our Instagram page, UPSC for Everyone. So see you next time. Till then, stay happy, stay safe. Namaste and Jai Hind.